Nellie Bly, born as Elizabeth Jane Cochran on May 5, 1864, lost her father at just 6 years old. When her family became unable to maintain their land and house, they moved. Later, her mother remarried but divorced due to abuse. Growing up, Nellie aspired to write as she invested in a handwritten letter to the editor of the Pittsburgh Dispatch. The short piece greatly impacted the editor by providing him with the perspective of the negative representation of women.
The editor did more than just read the letter, but also printed her rebuttal and offered her a job as a columnist that only addressed matters with women. However, Nellie wanted to diversify her articles to people with interests of more serious matters dealing with men and women. This caused her to begin looking for a paper that took her seriously and allowed her to write any story. In 1886, she moved to New York to work at the New York World.
Nellie Bly requested permission from publisher Joseph Pulitzer to go undercover in an insane asylum amongst real patients learning how they obtained treatment. This task was proposed to her by John Cockrell, an editor at New York World, as an attempt of compelling Nellie to prove herself to the newspaper, also to unveil the horrific treatments used in the asylum and their management techniques. After being given endless explanations of why she wanted to do this, Pulitzer finally agreed and promised to get her out of the hospital after 1 week. Putting aside any dangers and consequences, she accepted the challenge.
Her purpose for the investigation was to bring to light the inhumane conditions and dilapidation the patients endured. As she began her research, Nellie Bly probed the mystery that was the Women's Lunatic Asylum on Blackwell's Island. She dove into her assignment under the name Nellie Brown.
She stayed at an inexpensive boarding house prepared to sell her new identity. To end up in the asylum, she intended to pretend she was insane and poor, a plan she was sure would work. She did not speak much and stated that she was from Cuba, awaiting her suitcase to arrive. She stared at others and began to explain how everything was sad. She also asserted that she was afraid of insane people and that everyone there looked it.
Everyone bought her story. The next morning, her ploy was almost successful as it was planned for her to be sent to Blackwell's Island. To continue playing the role, she refused at first. The police, a judge, and doctors were called agreeing that she leave, not for the island, but for Bellevue Hospital. They wanted to check that she wasn't drugged before sending her straight to the asylum. Later, Nellie Bly was officially checked into the Women's Lunatic Asylum on Blackwell's Island.
For the first couple of days in the asylum, she refused to sleep, afraid of what might happen to her during the night. This led the nurses to believe she was crazier than they originally thought. To begin, the food provided for the patients was not in any way appetizing. Nellie was served beef, potatoes, bread, and coffee. She was most surprised to see the condition of the food. Although it was somewhat edible, she was still uncomfortable with the looks of the meal. Therefore, instead of indulging in undercooked, molded food, Nellie continued studying the other patients vigilantly.
The next couple of days, Nellie observed the girls' daily routines. Bly experienced one woman calling out for her son Georgie, and another one would sleep, constantly being awakened by her own snoring. While at the hospital, she realized how many of the women were not crazy, but instead misunderstood and misinterpreted.
Several women would often approach Nellie and sometimes start a conversation, which would lead to a small friendship that consisted of shared treatment stories and experiences. One woman told Nellie the story of when she was crying and being punished by the nurses, who were beating her with broom handles while several others were jumping her. The patient confided in Bly and explained her brutal experience of her hands and feet being tied together, all while being strangled with a bedsheet over her head so she couldn't scream. They would then fill a bathtub with freezing cold water and force the patient's head under until she no longer had any hope of fighting back. Nellie couldn't believe what she was hearing and felt heartbroken.
Bly was getting worried. A week had passed and she was still a patient in the asylum. She had to bathe, so the nurses forced her into a freezing cold bath. Throwing her into the water, they washed her aggressively with no hesitation. Another 3 days had passed when Pulitzer finally came to the asylum and retrieved Nellie.
When Nellie gained freedom from the island, she immediately started her article, going into detail of her encounters at the asylum, including several twists, shocking events, and stories from different patients. Her opinions were shown throughout the paper with anger and heartache. The article went viral and was eventually taken to court. In court, Nellie requested and demanded changes for the asylum. The judge agreed, but was confused when officials traveled to the island to discover the nurses being so polite. Also, not one patient Bly had interviewed was there to back up the story, but instead was discharged or transferred somewhere else, and the food found was healthy and fresh.
To illustrate how significantly she has influenced this medical field and its treatments, we interviewed nurses with questions relating to their experience with these special patients.
My name is Anita Brown. I'm a registered nurse, also a certified case manager. And I've been a nurse for 30 years.
So you've heard of Nellie Bly, correct?
Yes.
So do you think what she did influenced the way things are now with mental health care?
I think she exposed things were hush-hush or put in the dark for so long. I think she allowed doors to be open as far as exposure, which I think is, once again, creating knowledge and education about patients that were never permitted before, to such taboos before. So I believe, yes, she did a very good thing.
Hi, my name is Sheila. I'm an RN and I've been a nurse for 20 years.
My name's Diane and I've been a nurse for 35 years and I've been in the OR here for about 5 of those years. Used to do cardiac nursing prior to that, so, and I truly enjoy what I do.
My name's Camille. I've been a nurse for 21 years. I did do clinical rotations with psychiatric nursing during my college years, and also have dealt with psychiatric patients on my job.
Do y'all think that Nellie Bly doing the newspaper article actually helped progress insane asylums treatments?
Absolutely.
Because basically what they were doing is, you know, they were putting people that were not so bad in with people that were really bad.
Or even orphans
and then
who were
making the
normal.
people that were not
Right.
even,
Yeah.
I mean, and it could have been just something of an imbalance in the
yeah.
brain. There was nothing in the world.
Or even if your family might not like you and they just want to get rid of you, they
Yeah.
would put, and you'd be perfectly normal mentally.
I'm Marie Wells. I am an employee working here in the OR for many years, with 21 years of experience. I'm a surgical technician. I've seen lots of patients come and go over a period of time.
What was it like working with the psychiatric patients?
It can be very intimidating at times. I've worked down in the ER at times, and they have a special room designated for psych patients. And they have a locked door as well to these psych patients. And they have a security person that helps monitor these patients as well.
Was it much different from working with non-mental patients?
No, you try to treat them all the same, but you try to be very cautious at the same time. You don't try to treat anybody any different, but you try to, your guard's still up.
When working with psychiatric patients, what kind of obstacles are thrown your way and how do you overcome them?
Good question. Well, their environment. Sometimes they come from good environments and sometimes they don't. Meaning their hygiene may not be very well kept. Their language barriers are not the same as yours. Sometimes they talk very childish on a very kindergartenish level sometimes, although they may be 23 or 35 years of age or greater.
Everyone was shocked, yet they still believed in Nellie and stood by her side. The asylum was shut down and the cruel treatments were abolished. Following her articles, Bly persisted to write the book, 10 Days in a Madhouse, about her encounters. Blackwell's Island was later renamed Roosevelt Island. Nellie Bly is truly an inspiration to all psychiatric patients and has risked her safety to renovate the world of mental health care.